Hi everybody, so this is a process video from a piece that I painted a while ago, the Flower Market, and basically I was filming the video and I shared kind of a work in progress shot and said I'm going to share a process video for this piece, and then the piece kind of didn't go how I wanted it to go, so I didn't share the process video. But a few people were asking and I thought, you know what, yes, this piece doesn't go quite the way I want, but I think maybe that could be quite useful for you to see how a kind of piece starts well and then gets away from you and then kind of bringing it back on course. So yeah, here we are. I've done a sketch in sepia pencil, which is a Caran d'Ache Supracolor, so watercolour pencil, and I'm just putting my paint out of my palette, so it's all Winsor & Newton gouache, apart from one of the greens is from Arteza. So I'm starting with a light pink, so the red is flame red, and then just mixing that with the white, and I'm using a size 4 round brush from ProArt, which is kind of my go-to brush. So I have sped this up double time because otherwise this video would be 2 hours. So yeah, if you just kind of roughly keep in mind I'm doing everything twice as fast as usual, but hopefully it's slow enough you can still see what I'm doing. So I'm mixing a little bit of the yellow in with the pink to make more of a peach colour, and painting a dahlia. So I'm painting these, even though this is sped up, I was painting these really fast in real life because I just want to get them kind of really loose and expressive. So I've got 2 yellows on the page. I've got Naples yellow, which is that more kind of chalky, muted yellow, and then the bright yellow that kind of looks like an egg yolk, that is deep yellow. So just mixing up various peaches and then painting some gladioli. So I've got quite a lot of wet paint on my brush, which then makes the tip of the brush quite rounded instead of pointy, and then I can get these really lovely, soft, expressive petal shapes. But mostly at this point, everything is just kind of rounded blobs or that kind of dahlia shape, kind of big fat petals. And you can see I'm just pulling the brush into the centre to create those flowers. But yeah, I've sketched in the people and the buildings, and I've got a rough idea of the flowers having this kind of swoop across the bottom. But I'm painting quite intuitively in terms of where the individual flowers are going, what colours they are, what type of flower they are, that kind of thing. I'm just kind of making it up as I go along and just adjusting. So if I've painted a lot of peach and orange, maybe I'll put in a bit of pink next to balance it out. And I'm painting bigger flowers at the bottom, kind of in the foreground, and then smaller ones getting closer to the people. So this painting is based kind of roughly on Columbia Road Flower Market. So I looked at various reference photos of Columbia Road and people buying flowers, but it's not a direct copy of one photo. There's no photo that looks like this. So I've kind of put together, I looked at Street View for the buildings, I looked at various photos of people buying flowers, I made people up and I kind of made up the flowers and yeah, just put it all together to create this composition. So just doing some yellow at the moment. Putting in some little yellow flowers. And just working very intuitively as I go along. I'm kind of working from left to right on the page, but if I can see a gap or see that something needs balancing out, I'll bring more of a different colour in. So putting in a bit more pink. And I know that I'm going to be painting this with a mixed media approach, so that's why the flowers are so loose and blobby, because I know I'm going to work over the top of them with Neocolor pastels and probably pencil. Also, there's a lot of them. I kind of find the more there is of something, the more you want to simplify them. You know, for me, if you have this big swoop of flowers at the market and all the flowers were hyper realistic, I think it would be a little bit overwhelming, a little bit difficult to look at. I think if it's just one flower, maybe you want to have a bit more detail, but if it's 100 flowers, maybe it makes sense to see them as a whole and simplify them a bit. So just popping a bit of yellow here, because I've got a lot of very muted pinks and peaches and oranges, so I wanted a brighter, more acidic yellow to balance that. So I've mixed some white and some lemon yellow, and then mixing that white and lemon yellow mixture with some of the olive green and putting in the leaves. And you can see with all the leaves they're a single brush stroke, so I don't outline one side of the leaf, outline the other and then fill it in. I just do it with a single brush stroke. So mixing up another green here, so I've got some of that Viridian green with some of the red, which makes a darker, more muted green. So I've got two greens, one's more bluey and one is more yellowy. But I should have plenty on my brush, and then just doing these little directional brush marks, just filling in the leaves. And for these long leaves for the gladioli, I'm pulling the brush from the bottom up to the top quite quickly, which gives you nice neat points. I do quite like how it looks at this point, just with these very flat pastel flowers and the leaves. Kind of looks like a 80s Laura Ashley bedspread. And when I'm doing these long leaves, I'm holding my brush really upright. So I'm pretty much done with painting the flowers now. I'm going to be putting in some detail with my Neocolor pastels. So on this video, that's at about the 7-minute mark, which means in real life that was 14 minutes of painting. So yeah, as you can see, I painted all of those flowers and all those leaves really kind of very quickly and very loosely, because I just wanted them to feel very fresh and not overworked. And now I'm putting in some detail, but again, I want it to feel fresh and overworked, so I'm literally just scribbling on with the Neocolor pastels. So picking a colour that makes sense for what's underneath, so using kind of a warm red on top of a peach or a darker pink on top of a light pink, and just kind of scribbling on some petals to make things look like dahlias and peonies. Sorry if the whole table's wobbling while I'm doing this, it's just some vigorous scribbling. Just putting some detail on those gladioli. I'm putting a few centres and flowers using, I think it's Chinese green, which I love. It's kind of a muted, greedy yellow. It's really acidic. It sort of creates a nice bit of contrast, bit of pop. So we've got lots of peonies there. I love peonies, and I love kind of big, beautiful, open, blousy peonies, but I also love how they look when they're for sale in the market, where you just have lots and lots of like little pink balls. So just popping in a little bit of shadow on one side of the peonies to make them look a bit more 3D, but also kind of differentiate them from each other. And then starting to put a bit of the green in. I haven't finished doing all the detail on the flowers, which would be the sensible thing probably, to do all the detail on the flowers and then do all the green. Yeah, I'm going back to the flowers again. I just kind of get a bit excited sometimes and I'm like, oh, how will that green look? So I just have a go doing a bit of green. I'm also just doing those little signs. You know, there's like little white plastic price signs that say, you know, how much the flowers are. I've put those in and just done them with negative space, so I've just left the space and painted around them, which I always prefer to do that rather than paint all the flowers and then paint white signs on top with white paint. You could do that, but I never feel like it looks as fresh. using a very dark brown and putting in the centres on the sunflowers. And we've got a big peony in the front and putting in the centre of that. I do really love this bit. This is kind of the fun bit for me. It's like when you've made a cake and then you get to decorate it afterwards. This is kind of, I've put the initial painting down and now I get to do the fun bit and put all the little details in, and you just do a little squiggle and then suddenly it's a peony, or you just put a little circle of brown in the centre and suddenly it's a sunflower. So I really love that. Also, the amount of Neocolours I'm using in this is ridiculous. You'd think I have enough out, but I just keep reaching for more from the pot. So I've got a lot of different shades, because in a way it's quite a limited colour palette. Everything is basically pink or yellow or peach. Like, it's a very, very warm colour palette, but I've got lots of different shades of red and pink over the top. And now I'm starting to put in a bit of green. So working over the top of the green paint to kind of make it a little bit richer and fill in little white gaps. So the green I'm using here is moss green, which is a really nice kind of all-rounder green. It's warm, but it's not too muted. And then I've got a light green as well for some highlights. So kind of popping that on top of some of the dark leaves. And just filling in all the little white gaps, which is kind of a new technique for me. My work normally has a lot of white space, which I love. I love, having that breathing space and it feeling light and fresh. But at the same time, I think there's something lovely about filling in all the white gaps and it just feeling very lush and abundant. And I think that's quite exciting if you're someone that has a lot of white space in their work, to try to do something that's a little bit kind of fuller and richer. And using a dry material to fill in the white space can feel a little bit safer rather than doing that all with the paint. I think as an artist or an illustrator, sometimes, when there's a lot of white space in your work, you have to sort of question, is it a conscious choice to have white space, or are you just scared of doing backgrounds, or are you just scared of doing detail? And I think it can definitely be a little bit of both for me. So I'm trying to make it a conscious choice and sort of push myself to fill things in more when it's appropriate. So I stopped filming there and then picked it up the next day, and also my camera stopped filming and I missed like the last 30 seconds. So I think you just miss me putting in the writing on those little white plastic signs. But otherwise, I think you kind of see me doing most of the detail with Neocolour pastels, and then I've used a colour pencil for just scribbling in some writing on those signs. So I'm going to paint the people now. So I'm putting out some different colours. I've got The earth colours, the three that I always use are yellow ochre, burnt sienna and burnt umber. And I've put some more white on my palette so that I can mix those up. So starting with white and burnt sienna, which just makes a great kind of warm, pale skin tone. And working with the same size 4 round brush. And then making the skin tone a little bit deeper. So just adding more yellow ochre and more burnt sienna to it just to make a darker skin tone. Just adding a little bit more burnt umber to the palette, so making a deeper and cooler skin tone with the burnt umber. You need to be careful with burnt umber because it's quite a cool, it can be, depending on the brand, quite a cool toned brown. So if you just mix it with white, it goes a bit grey. So it does really need a bit of burnt sienna in there as well, just to warm it up. So I'm just painting everybody's skin tone first, and then some other people are holding bouquets of flowers that they've bought, so I'm painting those flowers now. And I've still got all the paint on my palette from painting the flowers, so I can paint everything the same colour and using the same technique. They're just a bit smaller in scale. So this lady's holding some peonies and some sunflowers. I think the key with a very busy piece like this is keeping the colour palette very consistent. This is something that does trip me up later because I pay too much attention to the reference photo and what's there in real life instead of what's actually going to make a good picture, because you know, you guys don't know what the reference photo it looks like, no one else does, so it's not really necessary. But anyway, for now I'm keeping this very warm colour palette. You know, if I suddenly started putting in some really bright purple flowers, or I suddenly started putting in some bright blue flowers, it would really draw the eye and kind of distract, maybe even jar a little bit. So I'm just keeping with this warm colour palette. And then painting the brown paper that the flowers are wrapped up in with this very kind of cool muted light brown. And that light brown for the paper and the flowers is a chromatic grey. So I mixed some of the deep yellow with some ultramarine blue and a little bit of flame red and lots of white, which makes it light, but also the white can make it a bit cooler as well, because I wanted the brown paper to contrast with people's skin tones. So everyone's got quite warm skin tones, or sort of like warm beige. I wanted this to be a cool beige. And you can see in my palette I've got one section that's got more white and one section with less white, so that means that I can add variety. So some of the kind of paper wrappers are a bit darker, some are a bit lighter, and if I have two that are next to each other, for example, I can do one a bit darker and one a bit lighter so that you've got contrast. You've probably noticed this, but I don't use outlines in my work really. You know, I never go around with like a black outline around everything, which does mean that you always have to think about contrast and definition. So if I have two things that are the same next to each other and there's no outline in between them, I've got to either leave a little bit of white space between them or paint one slightly darker than the other to kind of show the difference, and also it kind of pops it behind. It kind of makes it look like it's further back because it's a bit darker. And sorry, my head keeps going into shot. Just as we're getting to the more detailed stuff, I kind of need to lean in closer to see what I'm doing. When it comes to flowers, I can just paint them quite loosely, but with stuff like this, I have to be a little bit closer to see what I'm doing. So you can see what I mean there. I've got two different flower wrappers next to each other, and one's light and one's dark, and then the paper inside the wrapper is darker. So using those two different tones to kind of show that they're different and to show where the shadow is on the inside. And I've got some people holding paper bags as well, so I'm just kind of popping that in using the same colour. And going back to the Neocolor pastels to put in some detail on those flowers that I painted. And putting the leaves in. So just using that same green that was already on my palette and just popping in the leaves. And doing much smaller, lighter brushstrokes here because the scale of the flowers is smaller. And just putting some detail on those peonies. And the dahlias. So just adding the little details to all the flowers. And then putting a tiny bit of shadow on the paper wrappers with a brown pencil. So I think this is Van Dyke Brown. And this is a bit of a balancing act, because I feel like when you're adding shadows and outlines with a pencil, it can make it really pop and pull it together and stop it being so flat. But also it's very easy to overwork it and for it to look a bit fussy and a bit fiddly, and also for it to then take on a different look to the rest of the painting. So yeah, I'm just putting a little bit of shadow in and outlining, but I really don't want to do too much, because I don't want those to suddenly be really realistic and look different to the rest of the painting. Giving some people some rosy cheeks with a peach Neocolor pastel. My people always have rosy cheeks, which I think is kind of my signature. And if you've ever done a Zoom call with me, you know I have very rosy cheeks. But also I like that it gives people personality, and it also helps add directionality to their face. So whether you can see a lot of the rosy cheek or just a bit, or whether it's high up or low down, actually helps give direction to the face. So they're quite useful. So I'm now adding some shadows to the people and using that chromatic grey that I used before. I've made it lighter and added a little bit more blue to it. Pausing slightly at this point, deciding what to do, because I don't have a reference photo to work from. This is just a hodgepodge of various things. So some of the people in the sketch are people that I actually sketched in person on Columbia Road years ago. So I went through my old sketchbooks. Some of these people are from a live drawing session that Sarah Dyer did months ago, which was, the theme was like flower, kind of horticultural competition. So you've got people looking very thoughtful, looking at flowers. And then some of them are from photos that I found of Columbia Road. So it's a real mixture. So I'm kind of deciding what people should be wearing, and then how their clothes are going to fit into the colour scheme of the whole thing, how they're going to look next to each other. So I have given this lady a blue top, but it's a very muted light blue top, because I really don't want it to kind of fight with anything else. Again, sorry for my head in the way. I'm just leaning in to get these little details. So again, using that light blue. And then this lady was from a reference photo I found of Columbia Road Flower Market, and was wearing this pink top and had kind of dyed very light blonde hair. So I feel like she has to be wearing pink. So I got the blue Neocolor pastel out, and I was going to use that for the stripes, but I decided it was too chunky for the scale, so I got a blue pencil instead. But I like using a dry material for doing things like stripes, because it just adds a nice bit of texture. Putting a bit of shading on the lady's top using two blue Neocolor pastels. I don't know why I did that, really. I feel like this is the point where perhaps the painting's getting away from me. So my approach is very much work on instinct, just make it up as you go along, which where the flowers are concerned, served me well. But you kind of get to this point and you do need to carefully make decisions, because you need to decide what people are wearing and how that colour is going to affect the whole colour palette and how those colours are going to look next to each other. And I haven't kind of pre-planned this, which maybe I should have. So yeah, I'm just kind of making it up as I go along what I think people should be wearing. And I want to keep the people fairly anonymous in the way, like none of them is kind of a big character that you're drawn to, because I really want the flowers to be the subject of the picture, not the people. So putting in the faces now. With coloured pencil, which working on this scale, it's just easier to put in things like noses and outlines with a coloured pencil rather than with a brush, because you've got a lot more control. And then painting in some hair. So using that chromatic grey again to paint this lady's grey hair. And just painting that lady's dark hair. I feel like they're quite a stylish couple. And then this is from a quick sketch that I did at Columbia Road Flower Market years ago. And there was a girl kind of had her hair in a top knot like this, and she was wearing this really big oversized shirt with like a Hawaiian print and was carrying quite tropical flowers. So I sketched her at the time. And then this lady also was at Columbia Road Flower Market again. Top knot and sunglasses and black t-shirt. So for those that don't know, I'm talking about Columbia Road Flower Market, like everyone in the world knows what that is. It is a flower market in East London. So it's a very beautiful cobbled street with Victorian shops, and all the shops are, you know, independent boutiques and gift shops and coffee shops and that kind of thing. But every Sunday morning there's a big flower market there, and it is absolutely heaving. It's so busy. It starts early and you can buy really good value flowers and plants. So I've been there a few times with friends to sketch. So just using that brown pencil again to put in a little bit more detail. Decided they should be wearing sunglasses. So that lady's got nice big sunglasses. Actually, quite a lot of them have got sunglasses, but I think that's because I did my initial sketches on Columbia Road in the height of summer. So I think all these people actually were wearing sunglasses when I sketched them. And just putting details on people's faces with colour pencil. So generally, if people have a darker skin tone, I'll use a darker colour pencil. And if people have a lighter skin tone, I'll use a lighter, warmer pencil. So just painting this lady's hair now. Sorry that my head is in the way. It should go back in focus in a second, hopefully. Sorry about that. But basically painting her hair, again, using that chromatic grey that I mixed up. So it's actually been really useful. If you're doing a very colourful piece, but it's got little neutral details, mixing up some chromatic grey is useful for lots of different things. So yeah, painting kind of white bleach blonde hair can be quite tricky. So a very cool kind of multi-tonal yellowy grey colour can be quite useful just for putting a bit of shadow in. And this is why I really like using traditional water-soluble gouache, because I can go back to things like I needed a little bit more of that paper wrapper. The paint it's either still wet on the palette, or I can just add a bit of water to reactivate it. So I do like that it's water-soluble and I can go back to colours. I keep all these so-called disposable palettes and I can go back to colours, weeks later. Just putting a bit of highlight on that one. Just kind of, at this point, sort of sitting back, looking at it and thinking, where does it need more definition? Where does it need highlights, shadows, that kind of thing. The white Neo colour is good for adding highlights. So just doing all the little finishing touches here with the Neo colour pastels and with colour pencil. Okay, so at this point I've decided to paint the background, and in the photo there's kind of a light blue building in the middle and then kind of beigey buildings on the other side. Now this blue is way too distracting, and it's also, this is the shade of blue it really was, but if I was going to paint it blue I should have done more of a kind of periwinkle blue, a kind of sky blue with lots of red in it rather than this green tone blue, because I already have a sky blue in the picture, but I've painted it this blue that isn't currently in the picture, which then makes it really distracting. But I don't want the background to be distracting. I want the background to just be there, almost in kind of soft focus, not with a lot of definition, which is why I'm painting with this very soft rounded brush, because I want the background to be very loose. So yeah, but this was just me being too influenced by the reference photo and thinking, well, that's the way it looked in real life, that's the way it should look. So yeah, if I'd kind of tested this out somehow, maybe mocked up the colour on my iPad based on the sketch or put a colour palette together, I would have realised that this blue is too bright for the picture and it kind of draws attention away. One thing I did do actually, because I was not feeling sure at this point, is I took a high resolution scan of the image when it was just flowers, and I also took a high resolution scan when it was just flowers and people. So I think I kind of knew that it would possibly go wrong, and this is something I do when I'm not sure I'm about to commit and put paint to paper and I can't undo it necessarily, is that I'll take, but one bit of the painting has gone right, is I'll take a scan first, so that if I don't like how it goes, I've still got a high resolution scan of the original image without whatever the new edition is. But yeah, I really hadn't planned this part at all. Sometimes winging it works, sometimes winging it does not work. So again, using that chromatic grey to paint the kind of beige shop fronts. Which I think maybe I should have just painted them all various shades of beige. I don't know. Or all really light blue would have worked. You know, you do have to trust yourself as an artist and think, I know what's best. I know what makes a good image, rather than thinking, well, that's what the photo shows, so I better do it that colour. Yeah. And then mixing up a bit more of that cool beigey colour for the shop on the other side. And then mixing up a warmer brown for painting the brickwork. So kind of a pale warm brown. And painting the space in between those windows. These are Victorian shop fronts, so they've got these lovely kind of painted wooden facades and then wooden sash windows. So just painting the brickwork, so painting the space around the windows. Extending the brickwork a bit here out further. I don't know why I did that. That makes no sense. But yeah, I don't know why I did that. It kind of feels a bit awkward because the bottom is obviously this loose vignette, and then the top goes right up to the top of the paper, and then I've kind of extended the brickwork at the side a bit, which then feels a bit awkward because the picture kind of goes in and then out, and I honestly don't know why I did that. But I've got some slightly darker brown and I'm painting some bricks, so I'm holding the brush kind of parallel to the bottom of the page or to the top of the page and dragging the brush across, which gives you these nice little horizontal brick shapes. And then adding some blue to that chromatic grey so that I've got colour for painting the windows. Painting the inside of the windows, oh, such a nightmare. Do you leave them white? Do you paint them black and then they're really distracting? Do you try to paint what's behind the windows and then it gets really busy? Paint them grey, but then still it's kind of quite fiddly painting around those little skinny lines of the window panes. So yeah, painting the inside of windows is not my favourite. And just filling in some of the little gaps in between people with that chromatic grey as well. And filling in a bit more of that blue where it would be kind of in between people. Sketching in the windows with white Neocolor pastel first for some reason. Let's see how this is going to work. And then using that chromatic grey again for filling in the windows. So I think I sketched them white just so that I could see the white lines and then I knew where to paint. If you had a water-soluble pastel, you could do the lines and then just paint straight over it, but these are water-soluble. Yeah, I've already said it, but painting the inside of the windows, my least favourite bit. But yeah, mixing a chromatic grey does help because then you've got a nice soft grey that's not overpowering. Just lots and lots of painting windows. Like, I love the bit with painting all the flowers at the beginning, and at this point I'm just like, oh, we're almost there, almost finished. I wasn't really sure about that blue in the middle. I think because it's just one blue building with beige either side, I feel like it draws your attention. And also adding that bit of brick on the side wasn't working. So yeah, there was bits I love about this painting and then bits where I felt like it really got away with me and sort of went wrong. So I scanned it in and edited it and I cleaned up the sides. I think it's always really different seeing it. Cleaned up on screen as opposed to just on paper because it looks a lot brighter and fresher and then you can fix little things. So I took those bits off the side of the bricks and I think I kind of knocked back the colour of the background a bit but kept the foreground kind of bright and vivid. So I was a bit happier with that. Maybe all the buildings should have been light blue. I don't know. I think it's growing on me more as I look at it. And then I went back and I edited it and what I actually did was I just painted over the original and I just painted that middle shot pink and then also put some flowers in, but again kept them very loose because I wanted them to feel kind of soft focus and in the background. I'm not 100% sure about the flower baskets, the window baskets, I don't know, but I think maybe the pink's better. I don't know, you'll have to comment, do you like the pink or the blue more? Yeah, it's difficult when you have a piece that kind of gets away from you and then you kind of don't know what looks right and you kind of keep working on it and you're not sure. And sometimes it's good just to have a bit of distance from it and come back to it and you can kind of see it with fresh eyes. So yeah, that is how I painted that piece. So I think there's a lot of kind of interesting technical stuff in terms of the use of mixed media to build up that richness and lushness and the detail. But yeah, not planning things at all I think is fine for quick sketchbook pieces. But if you're going to spend a lot of time on a final piece, maybe planning the colour palette in advance is a good idea. because, yeah, I think you could tell by the end I wasn't really sure what I was doing. But there we go. Yeah, let me know what you think. Pink building or blue building?